The ground was already shaking when I grabbed the tongs off the smoker and ran toward the fence. 41 dragons were coming straight at me, and none of them looked like they wanted to stop. My name is Danny, and until that morning my only job on this colony was checking supply crates and fixing broken water pumps. Nobody trains you for this. Nobody hands you a manual that says what to do when a pack of young dragons the size of horses comes charging down a hill toward your camp. I heard Priya's voice crack through my earpiece before I even reached the fence. "Danny, get everyone inside. Now, those are Threshkin hatchlings, and they are hunting." "They're babies," I said, even though my legs were already moving faster than my brain could argue with them. "Babies the size of horses, with teeth built for tearing," she snapped back. "Move." The fence in front of me was made of thin metal poles and wire, the kind meant to keep out small animals, not stop a stampede of predators that outweighed a grown man 10 times over. It would not hold. I knew it. Priya knew it. Everyone watching from the camp knew it. The lead dragon was bigger than the rest, with a torn wing and pale gray scales that caught the sunlight as it ran. Its eyes were locked on the goat pens behind me, and behind those goat pens were the tents where children were sleeping through their afternoon nap, completely unaware that the ground under them was trembling. I did not have a weapon. I did not have backup. I had a metal rod in one hand, and old Mr. Reyes yelling into the radio that his brisket better still be there when this was over. The dragons hit the top of the ridge, and the whole group surged forward, like water breaking through a dam. Dust rose behind them in a thick cloud. The sound was enormous, claws digging into rock, wings flapping uselessly since they were too young to fly, throats letting out sharp cries that sounded almost like excitement. I turned toward the smoker sitting behind me, the one Reyes had been tending all morning, thick smoke rolling out of its vents and drifting across the camp. For one strange second, I thought about running. Then the wind shifted, and the smoke rolled straight toward the charging dragons, instead of away from them. The lead dragon's head snapped sideways. Its nose lifted into the air. Its feet, which had been pounding the dirt only a second earlier, suddenly slid and scraped against loose stone as it tried to stop. The dragons behind it slammed into each other, tumbling over themselves in a pile of wings and tails and confused snorts, the whole charge collapsing into chaos within seconds. "Priya," I said quietly, almost afraid to believe it, "are they stopping because of the smoke?" There was a pause on the radio. I could hear her tapping something quickly. "Their heart rates are dropping," she said. "That is not normal for a threat response. Something about that smell is calming them down." I looked at the lead dragon. It had lifted its head high, nostrils flaring, body completely still except for the slow rise and fall of its chest. The panic in its eyes from seconds earlier was gone, replaced with something closer to curiosity. Rhea's voice came through, breathless and confused. "Are my ribs saving the camp right now?" "Maybe," I said, and I meant it. I turned around, walked to the smoker, and pulled the foil off one of the racks. Steam rose from the meat, carrying that same rich smell across the fence line. I picked up a section with the tongs and held it out slowly, my hand shaking slightly, my heart pounding harder than it had during the entire charge. The lead dragon crept forward. Its steps were careful now, nothing like the wild stampede from before. It stopped a few feet from the fence, lowered its head, and sniffed the air for what felt like forever. Behind me, I could hear people gathering near the camp entrance, whispering, some of them recording on their handhelds, all of them too stunned to move. "Hey," I said softly, because somehow talking to a dragon felt like the only normal thing left to do. "You want some?" The dragon leaned closer and gently took the meat from the tongs, its enormous jaws moving with more care than I expected from something built to hunt. Behind it, the other 40 dragons slowed down one by one, sniffing the air, lowering their bodies until entire rows of them were sitting in the dirt like a strange, sleepy audience. For a moment nobody spoke. The only sound was quiet chewing and the crackle of the smoker behind me. Priya's voice broke the silence. "Danny, do not move. Let me get the response team out there before you run out of meat." "I only have 2 racks left," I said. "Then ration it," she answered. "Slowly. 1 piece at a time. Buy us time." I looked at the pile of dragons resting outside the fence, their chests rising and falling in slow, calm breaths, and realized I was standing in the middle of something nobody back on Earth would ever believe. I grabbed another piece of meat and offered it to the dragon closest to the fence, a smaller one with lighter scales and a nervous twitch in its tail. It took the piece just as gently as the first one had, chewing slowly, eyes half closed like it had just found the safest place in the world. Minutes passed like that, piece by piece, dragon by dragon. The tension that had filled the air earlier faded into something calmer, almost peaceful. My hands stopped shaking. My heartbeat slowed to match the rhythm of the animals in front of me. By the time the response team arrived with tranquilizer equipment and protective gear, they found something none of their training had prepared them for. 41 young dragons, lying calmly in a loose circle outside the fence, full and drowsy, while I stood there with an empty tray and a pair of tongs, looking like someone who had just finished serving dinner at a family gathering, instead of surviving a stampede. The lead scientist, a woman named Mira, who had been studying the local wildlife since the colony first landed, stared at the scene for a long moment before speaking. "This should not be possible," she said. "Their species has never shown behavior like this. Not once in every report we have gathered." "Maybe nobody ever offered them dinner," I said. She didn't laugh, but she didn't argue either. Over the next few days, the story spread through the entire colony. People who had never left their assigned workstations came to see the dragons resting near the fence, curious about the creatures that had nearly torn through camp and instead ended up sleeping in the sun like overfed pets. Children stood at a safe distance, watching in wonder as the animals stretched their wings and yawned instead of growling. Mira and her team spent hours trying to understand what had happened. They found that something in the smell of cooked meat triggered a response buried deep in the dragon's instincts, something connected to safety and comfort rather than hunting. Nobody could explain exactly why, but the pattern held true every time. Whenever the smoke drifted across the hills, the dragons calmed down almost instantly. Reyes, of course, took full credit for saving the colony with his cooking, telling anyone who would listen that his secret spice blend had tamed wild beasts nobody else could handle. Nobody bothered arguing with him, mostly because it was easier to let him enjoy his moment than deal with his complaining. As the weeks went on, the dragons kept returning. Not to hunt, not to charge, but to sit near the fence on quiet afternoons whenever the smoke rose from the camp. The scarred leader with the torn wing became a familiar sight, often the first to arrive and the last to leave, watching the camp with calm, patient eyes, instead of the wild hunger it had shown that first day. One afternoon, months after the incident, I stood at the fence with a young girl named Eliza, one of the children who had been sleeping in the tents during the original stampede. She held a small piece of bread in her hand, offering it carefully to the scarred dragon, who leaned forward and took it just as gently as it had taken that first piece of meat from me. "Are you scared of them?" she asked, looking up at me. "Not anymore," I said. "Turns out they just wanted to feel safe, same as anyone else." She smiled and turned back to the dragon, who lowered its head slightly, almost like it understood. Looking back on everything now, I still think about how close that first charge came to ending badly. One wrong move, one moment of hesitation, and the story could have turned into something painful instead of something remarkable. But instead, it became the reason our colony learned something new about this planet, something that changed how every future team would approach the creatures living here. We came to this world expecting to defend ourselves against everything unfamiliar. Instead, we found that sometimes the simplest gesture, sharing something warm and welcoming, could turn a dangerous moment into a peaceful one. Every Sunday since then, Reyes fires up the smoker, and every Sunday, without fail, the dragons gather quietly at the fence, waiting patiently for their turn, calm and unhurried, nothing like the wild charge that first brought them into our lives. And every time I watched them settle into the dirt, full and content, I remember standing there that first day with nothing but a pair of tongs and a hope that maybe, just maybe, kindness could work faster than fear. It did, and it still does, every single Sunday since.